Hello, everyone. So now today we are going to proceed for the VM, and today we are going to complete, the VM related all the aspects uh, at a at a high level, so that we will know that how we will be able to create VM either on the Windows environment or on the Linux environment, and what are the key factors. So first of all, I'm going to give you a kind of, whatever we discussed so far, I'm going to quickly take you through that. So, so far we have discussed on various aspects. Like in the previous call, we discussed about, and I'm going to share my screen. Yes, let me know in case if you can see my screen. Okay, thank you for confirming. Okay, so last time we discussed about some of the security aspects related with with the VM, and we discussed about the trusted launch VM. We also discussed about the confidentiality aspect of the VM. So, and we discussed on the TPM. We discussed on the aspects like this. We already discussed on the size of the VM. We already discussed on um, so I think it's visible now. Okay, okay. So we discussed on various things. So let us quickly go through it. So Azure Compute Services as a part of the VM, we have discussed about the reason availability set compute cluster. We have discussed about the introductory scenario for the VM. We discussed about the resources used in in a Windows machine. We discussed about, say, the virtual hard disk, the VNet, the network interface card, the IP addresses. So these, some of the default resources which get created with the VM, and these are like 7 or 8 resources. One is okay. So even I'll show you those resources once our Azure platform will start working. I will show you them. Then we also discussed on the checklist. So if we are creating a VM, how we need to start with and what all things we need to check. So we need to check with the network. We need to check with the name, location, size, pricing model, storage option, operating system. We discussed about the size of the VM. So we discussed on the 6 different type of sizes which are available. And within this, we also discussed on the subcategories. So these are the primary classification of the size of the VM. Say general purpose, compute optimized, memory optimized, storage optimized, GPU, and high performance computes. So these are mainly six categories of sizes, and within each of these sizes there are further subcategories. Now, coming to the next is, so we discussed on the subcategories. For example, in the general use of the computing, we discussed on these sizes, right? And heavy computational tasks we discussed like this. So all the F series is something related with the, heavy computational tasks. Normally, the DS series or the D series, I would say, D series is something related with the general purpose. F series is for heavy computational. Uh, E series and G series. So these E and G are for memory usage. Okay, and for data storage, or for big data or for NoSQL data like that, we need to use the LS series. And heavy graphics, we have all the N series. So this is easy to remember, heavy graphic, because we have, say, normally even if we are purchasing a laptop, we know that NVIDIA is a graphic card. So it starts from N, so we can easily remember that heavy graphic. Anything which is falling in the heavy graphic is coming for this N series, and it could be the NV, NC, NDC, NCB2, like that. And the high performance is something on the H series. So normally when we are doing a general purpose compute, we only use the D series, but there is a kind of conflict between the D series and the large memory, because DSV2 and DV2, these are also falling under the large memory, and these are also falling under the general purpose. Um, so going forward, I think Microsoft is going to make certain decision uh, to give, whether keep these items in the large memory or not, because last time we also discussed on the rationally behind it. Gradually, things which we call as high compute or high memory, after a few years down the line, it will become general, because the industry is moving on that direction, and the more and more technology comes in, and it require a uh, heavy computational need or heavy memory uses. So gradually things are moving uh, from uh, you know from the higher to the general level, and then something else will come in the higher level. We discussed on the example of the 2 GB hard disk. Till now, now 1 TB is also normal. So, and there was time when 2 GB was also like quite enough, and now 1 TB is also not enough. So because, of course, because the kind of work which people are doing, it depends on that how much memory consumption is needed or how much size is needed, right? And then we discussed last time on scenario for the build new or and lift and shift. These are the two cases when we are using the virtual machine. In case of lift and shift, particularly in case of build a new, we need to understand that are we going to build a new, and do you require the full control on the machine? If you need to build a new and you require a full control on the machine, then you are going for the virtual machine. In case if the migration option, so if it is a lift and shift, and if the demand is something like that which you can't containerize, then and there is no web app, or there is no API app, is a need. In case if there is any need of, say, web app, or in case if there is any need of, say, API app, you will not go for VM. In case if there is any need of, say containerization, you will not go for option of the VM. But in case if you need something where you need a full control, then of course you would like to go for the VM option, and then you will be choosing for the VM. So either, I mean, the another word of the lift and shift is the rehosting. So in case if your plan is for the rehosting, lift and shift, definitely you would like to go for this. Then we discussed on create a Windows virtual machine in the Azure. we have earlier we have created Windows virtual machines for I mean we created two type of Windows virtual machines. So and I have also given you that practical. I have loaded that on the LinkedIn, and you perhaps can see that. Okay, so that we did, and then we also discussed on the Azure core concepts in the full detail. So there is a different slide altogether for that. We discussed on that. Okay, now then we discussed on the trusted launch virtual machine. We discussed on the benefit of it, and we discussed on what is the what is the trusted launch means. What is the what are the security parameters it covers. We discussed on the confidential virtual machines as well. What do we mean by confidential virtual machine? So in case if you in case if you have any confusion till here, then you can ask me. Otherwise, we will go for the next, that is Azure Spot Instances. So quickly for 2 minutes, in case if you have any confusion, whatever, all the topics which I have already covered, feel free to ask quickly. So I'm just going to check. Check. Okay. So I can't see anyone is asking anything. So I assume that all these topics are very clear. Now we are going for the Azure Spot instance. So what do what do we mean by Azure Spot instance? Any idea? What do we mean by Azure Spot instance? And meanwhile, I'm also checking if I'm going to get the code from Microsoft to this ID. So I don't think that it is something related with the network latency, because my network is also good, and I think, but I think something weird on the Microsoft site, which is not sending the code till now. Okay, so on the Azure Spot instance. So on the Azure Spot instance, okay. So basically, Azure has some of the sites, some of the sites, or some of the machines which is not being used um, regularly. Okay, or in case if Azure is finding within a data center, if Azure is finding that some of the machines are like free and nobody has booked them till now. But if you want to play with those machines, then Azure allow you to use them on cheaper prices or on lesser prices. Okay, so that you will get advantage that you will be able to get the machine in the cheaper cost. However, um, in case if you are choosing this type of instances, which we called as Azure Spot instances, you will get the machine at a lesser cost. However, you will, Azure can take back those machines from you at any point in time. So that so even Azure will just evict the Azure Spot instances with say 30-second notice. So Azure will just give you a notice of 30 seconds that it want to take that machine from you, and it will take it from you. So the VM can, and that is known as eviction policy of the Azure. So for the Azure eviction policy, um, these VMs can be evicted based on the capacity or the max price you set. So when you're selecting these spot instances, Azure asks you that how much price, how much max price you would like to pay for. Okay, and then if you will say that, okay, I can go for say $10, $20, $30, whatever. Uh, so if Azure see that yes, you know, it's worthwhile for Azure, then it allow you. But in case if somebody would like to book that instance, or somebody's purchasing, the machine from the data center for their use, they will just give you a 30-second notice and they will close your machine. So that way, your machine will get deleted. So the VM, the benefit of these type of instances for you is that in case if you are doing it for say some very small, say practical purpose point of view, or just for your personal use, or the type of thing where you don't care, you are paying for it, but you don't care that, okay, in case if if Azure has the priority, then you can release, I mean, you are okay to get your things vanished out. In such cases you can go for it, and this is applicable for pay as you go subscription. So when you are in the pay as you go subscription, and you want your cost less, you can choose for the Azure spot instances. Okay, now, so you can set the eviction policy to deallocate or delete your machine. So there are two options of it. Either you can deallocate, which is the default option. You can say that, okay, in case of if Azure needs your machine, it can deallocate, which means that your machine configuration will remain in your this thing. I mean, in your subscription, but it will get deallocated. All the resources will get deallocated. Or another option is that you can delete. I mean, you can say that, okay, Azure can delete your machine. So the deallocation policy moves. So your deallocation policy moves your VM to the stopped deallocated state, allowing you to read deploy it later. So because you said that, okay, you are deallocated policy, you opted for the deallocated policy. So I mean, it will allow you to uh, reuse that because you opted for the deallocation. But in case if you opted for something called delete, then you will not be able to get it. So the deallocation VMs will count against your quota, because every subscription has a quota. So suppose in your quota you have say uh, two VMs which you can create, or maybe say five VMs which you can create within your quota, then because you have your deallocated VM, Azure has taken it out from you. But so you have a deallocated VM, so it will count against your quota. But in case if you are opted for the deleted, then of course, since your resources will get deleted, so you will not get counted against them. So if you would like to use, if you would like your VM to delete when it is evicted, you can set the eviction policy to delete, and therefore the VM delete the things altogether. So, but there are some of the cases when, so I mean, in Azure, everything is not like the defaulted, in the sense that everything has some limitations and some benefits also. So particularly if we are talking about, say, Azure Spot instances, um, these have um, these have like the limitation and not supported for all the VM sizes. So we discussed on the 6 VM sizes, out of which, and then the subcategories. So we can say for that spot instances are not applicable for the size. If you are selecting a size of, say, B series, if you are selecting the size of, say, DV2, NV, NC, H sizes, in case if you are selecting for Azure spot instances, um, uh, can be deployed to, say, any region, except, say, China region, and so China to Azure China to reason is where you don't, I mean, you will not have the Azure Spot instances. And of course, when we are talking about the prices, so prices will remain variable based on your reason and based on your SKU. And depending on that, you will be able to get your machine. Okay, so here we discussed about the VM and its, the deallocation policy and all that. Okay. Um, so any question on the Azure Spot instances? Anything out here for Azure Spot instances? Is it clear to everyone? Okay. Okay. Thank you. Okay. Now
Girish,
coming, yes.
sorry to interrupt. Just one question on the
Mm,
spot instance.
mhm.
Suppose I'm working on this one of the spot instances, and I somehow I realize later that I need the work that I was doing on the spot instance. Is there any way to request it to make it uh, make it permanently available for me, or make it some other category? Is there any way to request for that?
Very good question. So Azure, I mean, this is default on all the Azure machines, whatever you create. So there are two things out here. One is the define time, and one is the use time. So define time, at the define time, whatever you define, say you defined for a particular size, you defined for a particular reason, you defined for, say, Azure Spot instance, or you defined for a particular OS disk or the data disk, which we discussed earlier. If you're defining something, right? So define time, you can do anything, but uh, once it is defined, or once it is, if you are using, say, uh, your deallocated eviction policy, particularly in the Azure Spot instance, you will get the instance back in case if you have, I mean, in case if you will get the, I mean, in case if Azure see that, yes, the instance is now again available and nobody is using it. um, so that's the thing. Okay, but I think Azure is going to change this policy soon, and I will check it. But it's because there may be a need that you wanted to convert your Azure Spot instance into a permanent instance. um, that I mean, so far it's not allowed, but going forward it may be. Okay, but right now, I mean, this is for sure that you will you will have your spot instances. In case if you are choosing a deallocate policy and not the delete, then you will have your resources defined within your subscription, and once your instance will be available, or once that Spot instance will be available, you will be able to use it. Is it clear?
Yeah. Okay, Girish. Thanks.
Okay. Now, coming to the next, choosing the disk technology. So there are different type of disk. Okay. So one we call it as the disk storage of, say, which is for the persistent data. Okay. So mapping storage to disk storage used with the Azure VM for persistent data storage. So if you are talking about, say, persistent data storage, there are two categories of it. One is called as SSD and one is called as HDD. So SSD is, you might have heard this term quite frequently nowadays. Earlier, the term which we have been using, like the HDD, but still whatever the difference is, like, the difference between HDD and STD. The same is applicable here, but I'm just telling you that, for the people, those who don't know the difference between the HDD and SSD, is like, for the HDD particularly. So HDD is instance, sorry, is a disk which you can use, but it is of the um, uh, lesser performance. Okay. But SSD is the higher performance disk. So HDD, if we are talking about, so HDD has various things. Okay. So these, first of all, you must be knowing that these are no these are part of the managed, not managed disk. So managed disk handle Azure storage creation and management in the background for you. So these are not the managed disk. So managed disk will be managed by the Azure. You specify the disk size and performance tier, standard or premium, and Azure take care of it. But in case if you are defining it something, because you are going for the IS option here, when you are going for the VM, so you are choosing that, okay, I don't need a managed disk, I need something from my own. So then in that case, either you can use the traditional platter disk, which we call as STD, or you can go for the more solid state drive. So hard disk drive is HDD and solid state drive is SSD. So you can opt for the solid state drive, or you can opt for the hard disk drive. So if you are going for the SSD storage available, within the SSD also, there are two levels of SSD storage. One is called as standard and one is called as premium. So you can choose the standard SSD if you have normal workload, but want better performance. So your workload is normal, but you are seeking for a better performance. But choose the premium SSD if you have IO intensive workload or mission critical system that need your quick processing of the data. So you need to choose the SSD. So HDD is standard. Okay. So if I'm talking about here, so HDD is standard. So if I'll say particularly SDD, which is hard disk drive, this is standard. Okay. This is standard, which means that you can use it for your standard workload, for your normal performance. Now coming to the SSD, which is solid state drive, these state drive are of two types. Again, one is the standard and one is premium. So you can use the standard in case if you have a normal workload, but you want a high performance thing. So your things are high performance. Your interest is that your workload is normal, but you are seeking for a high performance. Okay. Then you can go for standard. Otherwise, you can go for premium. So premium is where you have the mission critical data, or where you have, I mean, where you need a very high performance stuff. Then you can go for premium SSD. Okay. Where your intensive workload uh, is needed. Okay. Now coming to the next. So mapping storage. So Azure, I mean, when you're creating something on the Azure um, VM, so the another term which we are using for the virtual, I mean, for the disk is, I mean, that we known as VHD. So VHD stand for, if I'm talking about here, so this is VHD. VHD is the virtual hard disk. Okay, so virtual hard disk to represent the virtual disk for the VM. So VHD replicate the local format and the data of a disk drive, but are stored as a page blob. Okay, so in case if you are interested for that, then you can go for the page blob type of disk. And when you are talking about the page blob type of disk, what does that mean? Is that Azure? I mean, I think we have discussed in our um, uh, previous sessions when we covered our fundamentals about different type of blobs, right? So we discussed about I mean, what are the two categories we discussed on the blob? Anybody remember?
I think the page blob and block one.
Blob, correct. So when we are talking about the VHD, so VHD is using the page blob. Uh, yes, page blob, blob, append blob, correct. So so particularly, I mean, if you are talking about the VHD is using the page blob. Okay, so you can choose on a per disk basis what type of storage it should use and how you want it to go for. Now, by default, by default, two virtual disks will be created for your VM. One is called as the operational system disk, and one is called as the temporary disk. Okay, so the operational system disk is your C drive in your general sense. Okay, so that your C drive, and it is having I mean, the capacity is like 2048 GB. So 2048 GB is your capacity of your, normally your capacity of the C drive. And then the temporary disk. This provides the temporary storage for the OS or any app. It is configured as D drive by default. D drive by default, and is sized based on the VM size, making it a deal, making it an ideal location for the Windows paging files. Just 1 minute, I'm going to 1 minute. Okay, So by default, there are, these VHDs are used for the operating system disk and for the temporary disk. So the operating system disk is known as the C drive, and the capacity of it is 2408, 2048 GB, and the temporary disk is known as the D drive. And by default, and its size varies between, based on the VM size you are using, or whatever size you are using, right? So temporary disk is not a persistence disk. You should only write data to this disk that you are willing to lose at any time. So operating system disk will remain with you, and the temporary disk, since it is not a persistent disk, so you can whatever data you write into it, it will get in case if you're willing to lose that data, you can write it. So since this is known as a temporary disk. Now coming, so you might be thinking that then what is where we can keep our data. So we will discuss that later. Okay, but right now you can think of that within the SSD and HHD, sorry, SSD and HDD. And within the SSD, there are two type of disks. One is called as the premium disk, and one is called the standard disk. Within the, within these disks, again, you have a concept of say VHD, and the VHD is a page blob based on, base disk, and this disk is like when you are creating it. So basically, you will get say C drive and the D drive. So the C drive is known as your operating system disk, and the D drive is known as your temporary disk. In case if you're putting your data on the D drive, normally the use of the D drive is for your temporary purpose. For example, it is using your when you are launching something, so anything is needed. Either on your either for your application or for your operating system, to do some temporary stuff, or to keep your temp files, or to run your stuff. For all those purposes, you are using your internally this disk will be used. But you should not be keeping your data, or in case if you are if you want to keep some data in it, you should be ready to lose that data. So that is your concept. Now, if you are coming on the standard SSD and with the premium SSD, so we discussed that standard SSD is the low cost, and the premium SSD is, of course, not low cost, but it is for the high performance. So the objective of the SSD is the high performance. For the objective of the standard SSD is to optimize for the test and entry level production, used for high throughput. But the cost depends on the size, number of disks, outbound of data transfer, number of transactions, how many number of transactions you would like to achieve, because the idea here is that higher throughput. So you can always think on the number of transaction, outbound data transfer. If you create a snapshot of a managed disk of 64 GB capacity, and actual use say 5 GB of data, the user will be billed only for the 5 GB. So you are so that's why it is called as pay as you go. So whatever you use, you are billed for that, even if you are creating a snapshot of say 64 GB, but out of it, if you are using say 5 GB, you will be billed for the 5 GB. Now coming to the premium, it is high performance, it is high IOF workload with a high throughput, and the cost depends on the size, the number of disks, the outbound data transfer, the disk size provide IOPS per second, per disk, and throughput per disk. So where you have the higher workload demand and higher performance both. So there you use IOPS is your input output operations. Okay. So in case if you need more input output operations, you will be able to use your um, premium disk. Okay. Okay. Now, so you can select your operating system based on your business requirement, and then you can use your stuff, I mean, the way you want. Now, next is coming, as I mentioned you last time, that there are two type of disk. One is one we call as the managed disk, and one we call as unmanaged disk. So the managed disk, we need to understand. So as I mentioned you, that when we are creating the premium SSD, or we are creating the standard SSD, or we are opting for the HDD, right? Since we are creating it for the for a virtual disk, I mean, for a virtual machine, and all these are the virtual disks. So collectively, these are termed as VHD, right? But when you are creating a disk, you are having the two type of partitioning. One is the C drive and one is the D drive. So for the C drive, your operating system, I mean, will be kept there. So it will be, it is a persistent storage. In case of it is a D drive, it is not a persistent storage. It is a temporary storage, but you will be I mean, you will be using it for your, I mean, to keep your different type of temporary stuff, stuff, either for your operating system or for your application, right? However, in case of a in case if you are opting for managed disk, then you don't need to care about, then Microsoft will be using it, right? Now, so the question comes in that, what about the data? So in case if I need to store the data, will capacity of the C drive and D drive are same? No. C drive always have a maximum capacity of right now 2480. Okay, sorry, 2048 GB. But your temporary disk is of, I mean, depending on the size of, I mean, the size you are opting for. So it can vary depending on the type of operation you are using. Of course, for example, you are using for the general purpose, different type of options. In case if you are using it for the compute optimized, or you are using it for memory optimized, or you are using it for your high performance. So depending on the size and you are opting for, accordingly you will be, I mean, your temporary disk may vary, because temporary disk is the place from where your performance, your throughput, your workload, and all other things are getting managed, because it is keeping the temporary data. However, so I mean, it will not be same from your question. Okay, so it will, I mean, it vary depending on the size. Okay, okay, Parvis. Now next is, okay, so next is, what about the data? Okay, so let us talk about the data. Okay, so you have created a VM, and you are good with that. So now you have your operating system, now you have your temporary disk, and you are using it. But ultimately, I mean, you can't store your data either in your operating system, but you can store your data in your temporary, but you will lose that data, right? So you can store the data on the C drive along with the OS, but a better approach is to create a dedicated data disk. So in case if you are keeping it along with your OS, since it is not, I mean, since it is a persistent store, you will be able to do it. But better if you create a dedicated data disk. You create and attach additional disk to the VM. Each data disk can hold up to approximately 32767 gigabytes of data, with the maximum amount of storage determined by the VM size you select. So I can see some question. A person as a solution architect or infra team will define require capacity for the solution, or its client who provide the capacity for respective VM. Okay, so client always, okay, so there are different type of things here. If your client is saying that, okay, you manage it and you are an architect, you are defining everything, you are saying that, okay, this is what the solution is. So as a solution architect, you are defining it, and then infra team and then you are placing that requirement to the infra team, saying that, guys, we need this thing for our for our infrastructure. Okay, and then they will start managing it. Okay, so based on, and they will cost you for that. So but this is the responsibility of the solution architect. It doesn't matter whether the solution architect is coming from client side, or it is coming from IBM side, or it is coming from any company side. Okay, so the definition requirement, who will define it and how it will get defined, that will always lies on on the architect based on the business need. Now, so hope I am able to answer your question, Parvez, right? So thank you. So each data disk can hold up to how much? 32767 GB of data, and you can define different data disk. Okay, so you may, I mean, depending on your data need, you can say that, okay, I need one data disk. Okay, so I mean, you will get that. If you need two data disk, I mean, that depends on, or if you need n data disk, it depends on you. But each data disk can hold up to 32767 of data, with the 32767 GB of the data, with the maximum amount of storage determined by the size, by the VM size you select. Okay, so the maximum size starting from 32767, then the maximum size is depending on the VM size you select. An interesting capability is to create the VHD image from a real disk. This allow you to easily migrate existing information from an on-premise compute from an on-premise computer to the cloud. So you can, if you are having a lot of data on your on-premise, and you have a disk, a data disk within your on-premise solution, you can create a VHD out of it. Okay, and you can create a VHD image out of it, and that, then once you create the image of a real disk, you can say that, okay, this is my image. I wanted to transfer that entire data from my on-premise to my cloud. Then you can go and say that, okay, I'm going to define the image there. Okay, so I can just transfer, because I have created the image, so I can just go and upload the same on the VHD. Okay, so that's that way you will be easily able to migrate your existing information from on-premise to the cloud. Now, the final storage choice you will, I mean, you will make whether you wanted to go for the unmanaged disk or the managed disk. With unmanaged disk, you are responsible for the storage account, right? Because that is what the unmanaged disk means, right? But that so you are creating so you are creating the VHD for, I mean, for that purpose, right? So you pay the storage amount rate for the amount of space you use it. A single storage account has a fixed rate limit, that is 20,000 IOPS. This means that a single storage account is capable of supporting 40 standard virtual hard disks. So even if you are creating, I mean, remember that whenever you are creating a disk, you are definitely creating a storage account, right? So in case if you are creating an unmanaged disk, so first of all, you are creating a storage account. Now from that storage account, then you can create your your data disk. Now each data disk has a certain capacity starting from 32767 GB to the maximum, whatever the BM, whatever the BM size. However, you pay, a single storage account has a fixed rate limit of 20,000 IOPS. This means that a single storage account is capable to support 40 standard virtual hard disks at full throttle. If you need, if you need to scale out, then you need more than one storage account. So a one storage account, so I can say here, you are creating a storage account. Okay, now this storage account can handle 20,000 IOPS. Okay, which means that you can have multiple hard disk here. Okay, sorry, when I'm saying hard disk, that means your VHD. Okay, so that means that you can have 40 standard virtual disk here. So you can have 40 standard virtual disk. Okay, and that too on the full on the full capacity. But in case if you need more than 40 virtual disk, then you need to switch, and then you need to create your another storage account. Okay, and this is for unmanaged disk. Is it clear? Now coming to the managed disk. Managed disk are newer and recommended disk storage model. Okay, so they elegantly solve this complexity by supporting different methods. Okay, so in case if you wanted to go for the managed disk, then this is a new concept, and here Microsoft will manage everything. So they elegantly solve the complexity by putting the burden of managing the storage account onto the Azure. You specify the disk type, either you go for the premium or you go for the standard, and the size of the disk, and Azure create and manage both the disk and the storage for you. You don't have to worry about the storage account limits, which makes them easier to scale out. So right now it is supporting, say, if you're going for an unmanaged disk, it is going to support, say, 20,000 IOPS. But in case if you need to exceed it, which means the 40 VHDs. But in case if you need to go beyond that, then of course it needs more. You need to create another storage account, and you need to manage. You need to keep monitoring that how many disks you need actually. Okay, but and in case if the demand goes down, then again you need to think and you need to monitor it, and based on your monitoring capability, then you will be able to use it. Now coming to the but when you are coming to the managed disk, you don't need to bother about these things, and it has the increased reliability, it has the better security, it has the snapshot support, and it has the backup support. Okay, so it has the backup. When I'm saying that it has the better security, managed risk are truly managed resources in the resource group. Okay, this means they can use your role-based access control to restrict who can work with the VHD and who can't. So that's how, because the managed support the better security by using the role-based access security RBAC. Okay, similarly you are have you know that for the snapshot support, snapshot can be used to create a read-only copy of the VHD. You have to shut down the owning VM, but creating the snapshot only takes a few seconds. Once it is done, you can power on the VM and use the snapshot to create a duplicate VM to troubleshoot a production issue or roll back the VMs. So particularly that ways, you can use your snapshot support also, particularly for the managed disk, because with the help of snapshot, you are creating a copy of I would say a read-only copy of the VHD. Okay, and with that you will be able to use it. Okay, so you can troubleshoot your things or your production issues, or you can roll back the VM or whatever you want. And similarly, you are also having a backup support. So managed disk can automatically backed up to a different region for disaster recovery if you want. I can see some question. How does snapshot different from image, or both the same? Okay, so snapshot is basically you are using as a read-only disk, okay, a read-only image. So there you are using the snapshot, and why you are using it? Because you want uh, to troubleshoot your things. So therefore you are using your snapshot, okay. But creating a image is a different thing. So we discussed it during the, I mean, that we can create an image of the on-prem disk for, I mean, for the purpose of the migration. Okay, so both are different concept altogether. Make sense? Okay, so now we are going for the next. Just 1 minute. Sorry, I was on mute. So if we are creating, so there are two concepts here. One is delete with VM and one is the encryption at host. So when we are choosing a delete with VM, which means the disk which we are which we are creating, we want that in case if the VM get deleted, we are okay that the image can also get deleted. That's fine. So in that case, we can use the delete with VM. We can use the encryption at host when we want the encryption in the place. Okay. Now I will explain the encryption in more detail. I'm just coming back in a minute. So am I audible? 1 minute. Now we are coming to the delete with VM. So as I explained, in case if you are opting for the delete with VM, the VM will get deleted. Uh, once the VM will get deleted, your disk will also get deleted. That we call it as delete with VM. But in case if you are choosing for the encryption at a host, then what will happen? Let's see. So Azure disk encryption. Let us first understand what is the meaning of encryption. So encryption means protecting and safeguarding your data to meet your organizational needs. So in case if you want to safeguard your data, okay. Now encryption happen at a two level. One is encryption as a at a one we call as encryption at rest, and one we call it encryption um, at a transit. Okay, so these are the two type of concepts. One is encryption at rest, and second is encryption as during the transit. So when we are doing the encryption, it helps protect your data to meet your organizational security and compliance commitment. So the encryption helps to encrypt the OS and data disk of uh, any VM you use, right? So encryption means the encryption of the OS disk and encryption of the data disk, okay, inside your VM using the CPU of your VMs through the use of feature called DM crypt for Linux or the BitLocker feature of Windows. So there are two different features, or I would say two different technology, which is being used to do the encryption. If you are using a Linux VM, then you are using DM crypt method. In case if you are using Windows, you are using BitLocker method. Okay, so these are two type of method. So ADE, which is your encryption, encrypted disk, is integrated with the Azure key vault to help you control and manage the disk encryption keys and secure and secrets. Okay, so you are using the Azure key. You are using the Azure key vault to help you control and manage your disk encryption keys. So always remember that whenever you are using encryption method, you are creating a keys for your encryption, and you are dealing with the public key and the private key. So you are keeping your keys in your Azure key vault to keep to keep the control of your managed disk. Okay. Now for VM you are using DM crypt, and for Windows you are using BitLocker. Okay. Now coming to the server side encryption. So there are, as I said, that there are two type of encryption. One is encryption at rest, and one is as encryption at transit. So if we are talking about encryption at rest, that means we are trying to encrypt our OS disk or maybe the data disk, but definitely the OS disk, because for OS disk there is no transaction. For data there is, it's a concept of either it's a persistent data or it's a transit data, right? So when you are doing encryption at rest, that is where you can have either your OS disk or you can have your data disk. So when persistence on the storage cluster, okay, so that is where you are saying that server side encryption. So server side encryption of your Azure disk storage. Now encryption at host, okay, ensure the ensure that the data is stored on the VM host your VM in encrypted mode at rest. Okay, so there is a check. You will see when you're creating your VM that you have an option of encryption at host. If you're choosing your encryption at host, that means you are keeping your data at rest and you wanted to put them into your encrypted bucket for your storage cluster. Okay, so encryption is part of the layered approach to security and should be used with other recommended methods of the security to secure your virtual machine and their disk. Okay, now coming to so in case if you are having encryption at rest, OS and data disk, encryption at rest with platform and managed key, that is your platform key and your managed key. Temp disk encryption, no. Encryption at caches, no. Data flow encrypted between the compute and storage, no. because you are you are just moving your data between your compute and storage. Okay. Let me choose a notes. So encryption, data flow encryption between the compute and storage, no. Computer control of the keys, no. Does not use your VM CPU, no. Definitely, it will use your does not use your VM CPU, yes. And work for the custom images, yes. And it is for the Microsoft Defender. So if you are talking about your Microsoft Defender for the for cloud disk encryption status, it is not applicable if example. So that happens particularly for encryption at rest. Okay, when you are doing it with the managed keys. Now coming to the encryption at rest with the customer managed keys. Okay, so this is your platform managed key. That's why it is known as PMK, that is platform managed key. Now, when you are going for the encryption with your customer managed key, so everything else will remain same except your customer control keys. It is yes, and does not use your your VM CPU, yes. And it is so both here and here, either you are using the platform managed key or customer managed key, the things are same, except here it is customer control keys are there. In case of if you are going for the Azure disk encryption, then everything is yes, but this is no, does not use your VM CPU because you are using Azure disk encryption. So everything will be managed by Azure, and your disk will, your CPU usage will not be there. And work for the custom images, no, because and here it is working for the custom images, does not work for the custom Linux images, uh, because anyways, Azure is something related with the Windows. So for Windows, still it is applicable, but not for the Linux. And here, the Microsoft Defender, if you're, if deployed, then it will say that your disk is healthy. And encryption at host, everything is yes, because you are doing encryption at a host. So everything is yes. But if you're going with the Microsoft Defender for cloud disk encryption status, it will still show not applicable, or if it is exempt, or it will show show it as unhealthy. So here particularly only for the Azure disk encryption, it will show it as a healthy. I wanted to check if there is any question. Okay. So no question. Now we are going for the virtual network communication. This is a very big chapter. We will not cover it here. So let me see. The practical part. Okay. Now it's 12:53. It's approximately 1. So we have 7 minutes for that. So I wanted to check with you. I think with this, I think I have created all the concept of the VM with the managed disk, unmanaged disk, type of VM, security, and all other concept. Next class we will do the practical. Okay, so completely we will see the practical, and then we will wind up for the virtual machine, and we will start on the next topic. Okay, so before before that, if you have any question, please ask me.
Girish, can we get this PPT for the quick reference? Maybe if you want to recheck the concepts.
Okay, so I'm loading this this on the LinkedIn. So on the LinkedIn, you will be able to see see all my recordings. And in case if you have any question, because so far, I mean, I have not seen that, or I'm not sure whether you are taking a look on the recordings. So look into the recordings, and if you feel that you have any question, you can ask me. So during the recording, you will get all the things, right? And these PPTs actually, I mean, earlier I was not having the PPT. So I mean, in case if you will see my earlier lectures, I have I was not having